Hello and welcome to another edition of Meet the Red Cross. I'm Dave Griffith, the Executive Director of the Heart of Missouri chapter, and joining me on the show today with me right now is Clayton Kennedy, and Clayton is our Community Market Manager. We're going to be talking about Holiday Mail for Heroes, and we're also going to be talking about what's going on in the Philippines right now. And then on the second half of the show, bring in one of our board members, Reverend Sam Powell, and he's going to share with us his reason for being on the board and his connection to the Red Cross. So, Clayton, welcome to the show. Glad to have you back on again.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here.
We are going to talk, and I want to initially talk about the Holiday Mail for Heroes program that we've got going on right now, and then really we're taping this on November the 12th, and recently we just had the typhoons in the Philippines, and so we want to just briefly touch on that as well if we have enough time. But
excellent.
But let's talk about Holiday Mail for Heroes and really what that means.
Sure. Well, one of the Red Cross's 5 basic lines of service is service to armed forces. We help military families and members of the armed services in many different ways. And one of the small campaigns that we do every year, a feel-good campaign that reaches out to those servicemen and women, is called Holiday Mail for Heroes. Over the past 6 or 7 years, nationally, the Red Cross has collected about 6.5 million holiday cards for our servicemen and women who are deployed, who are here nationally, as well as for our veterans. Last year, the program pulled in about 1.2 million cards. Here in the Heart of Missouri chapter, we pulled in about 1,000 cards last year. We're aiming to do many more than that this year.
Well, I know in the St. Louis region, it's really been going on there for quite some time, and we just started that here in our chapter this last year, and we had a card signing event at the Columbia Mall.
Yep.
And from what I understand, we're going to expand those signing locations this year.
Absolutely. We have been building it up this year and are engaging with the campaign in many different ways. We've got 3 major public signing events. The first will actually be tomorrow, November 13th, at the Sarah Evans concert in Columbia at Jesse Hall. We will be there. Sarah Evans is one of our national celebrity cabinet members. And so we'll be doing a shout out on stage about the Red Cross. We'll have a booth set up in the foyer there and one of our response vehicles outside. So that'll be the first one. Then this Saturday, November 16th, from noon until 2 p.m. At the Columbia Mall, we'll have another booth set up toward the Dillard's wing there from noon until 2 on the Saturday the 16th. And then a week from now, on November 23rd, I believe, Saturday, we'll be having a booth set up at the Capitol Mall in Jefferson City from 1 until 3 p.m.
Let's talk just very briefly about Sarah Evans. And most people from around here know that Sarah is from Marshall, Missouri, or Boonville.
Boonville.
Yeah, Boonville, Missouri, over on the western part of our chapter area. And since 2005, she has been on our celebrity cabinet. We heard an interesting story here about what her connection was and how she really came to us. Can you share that with us?
Sure. On Christmas Eve of 2004, a tsunami struck Southeast Asia, one of the most devastating natural disasters that has ever happened, over 200,000 deaths. And it was obviously a major relief effort that needed to go into play there to help all those hundreds of thousands of families that were suffering. Sarah was quite taken by what the Red Cross did in that effort. Both the American Red Cross, what we did here locally to support that effort in terms of getting resources over to the Indonesia and Thailand and other countries that were affected, as well as what the International Red Cross, Red Crescent Global Network did. Indonesia had its own Red Cross, Thailand had its own Red Cross. Those local nations' Red Crosses were the ones who were determining what was needed, what assistance was needed, and they relayed their needs to us in the United States. So Sarah Evans saw all of that and thought, wow, how incredible that the Red Cross not only helps people here, but is able to reach out and support major disasters like that. And so at that time, she said, this is something I want to be a part of. And she joined our National Celebrity Cabinet. And she has been a member and an active member of the cabinet since 2005.
And we're going to have a card signing there that evening, tomorrow evening there at the concert. But you know, when we start talking about the importance of holiday mail, and we just finished with Veterans Day, and really a lot of those emotions that, and being a veteran, a lot of those emotions that we have of when we were serving our country, one of the things that always comes back, and that is the mail. There's mail call every day, and you stand there in mail call and you wait for your name to be called, and
you really hope it gets called.
And you hope it gets called, but so often it doesn't. And especially around holiday time, when family is really what you're thinking about most, being able to stand there in line and have your name called and have a Christmas card or a holiday card given to you has got to be something very special. And then the ones that are handmade, and I'd like for you to talk about those as well, Clayton, but those have got to be exponentially more impressive.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's any sort of connection, any sort of gesture from someone in the form of a card is appreciated, but when they're handmade, homemade, especially by children in many cases, those are the most powerful ones oftentimes. And for that reason, we are working with elementary schools throughout our whole chapter, in many different communities throughout our chapter, working with schools and teachers to have their classes make cards themselves, where they'll just use construction paper or whatever, and write what their understanding of the holidays are and of the sacrifice that these soldiers are or have made for our safety, for our capacity to be with our families safely and securely celebrating the season.
Well, and I think that most people that are living around here know that we have the VA hospital over in Columbia, and we take a lot of cards over there. Matter of fact, you were just over there yesterday.
We were with our leadership council. We delivered many cards for Veterans Day as well as some comfort kits.
And we've also got, besides the VA hospital, we've got 2 veterans homes. And we have one veterans home that's up in Mexico and one that's down in St. James, and those are both in our chapter confines. And so those cards are all delivered to those folks. And I know that I've talked with many of the staff down there, and they say, we get all this all at once. We have Veterans Day, and then we've got Christmas, and we get all the attention. And it would sure be nice if we could stretch that out throughout the entire year. So I think that we're going to try and find some ways that we can keep engaged with our veterans throughout the entire year. Absolutely.
I think we're thinking of maybe doing a barbecue at the Truman VA Hospital this spring, and we'll see what else we can get together.
Well, I think that the event tomorrow evening with Sarah Evans is going to be one that we're going to remember for a while.
Yeah.
And having those kind of partnerships, and really those are genuine partnerships that we have with those celebrities, and they're very, very meaningful. I want to take just in the last few minutes that we have with you, Clayton, to talk about what's going on with the Typhoon.
Yeah, well, so this is obviously a devastating moment for hundreds of thousands of families. The death toll, people have heard 10,000, something like that, but the number of affected families are far, far more. And so the Red Cross, the International Global Red Cross Network, is putting a lot of effort into getting that relief there as fast and fully as we can. As with any disaster, we prioritize the message that we get from our local partners, the people who are right there on the scene, able to ascertain what the needs are. So fortunately, the Philippines has a remarkable Red Cross organization. They've got about 1,000 staff, and about 500,000 volunteers, an incredible number, 500,000 volunteers throughout the Philippines that have all been activated and are working to support this relief effort. We hear about the devastation. One thing that we don't hear perhaps is about all the people who got out of the way, who were able to get to safety in advance. And that happened in no small part because of Red Cross volunteers working all night, working long hours in order to get out warning messages, get safety shelters set up. In fact, 125,000 families that could have been in the direct path of the typhoon were instead safely in shelters when the typhoon hit. So the death toll is astronomical, is horrible, but it could have been 5 times worse, or even more than that. So yeah, we're supporting that Philippine Red Cross organization. So far, the American Red Cross has sent a team over there, which includes both communication specialists who have brought satellite systems with them, because that was one of the needs that they said we need help with the communications, and then several other disaster specialists who are helping with the evaluation and helping make a map toward recovery in this difficult moment.
Well, I know that the country we live in, especially the community we live in, are very giving, and they want to do something. And although you may want to get together and put together water and kits and all that, the best thing that people can do right now is to make a monetary donation to the Red Cross. And Clayton, I think I want to follow up with you maybe next month and see kind of where we are on this. But if you would like to donate to this disaster, this typhoon disaster, you can do so by coming by our office either here in Jefferson City or in Columbia, by giving us a phone call, and the number will be on the screen at the very end. And obviously also there are ways that you can go online through redcross.org, or you can go through our 800 number, 1-800-RED-CROSS, and make donations that way. But we'll keep you informed as to what's going on. Please stay with us. We're going to have Reverend Sam Powell with us for the second half of the show. We'll be right back after this message.
2 o'clock. Okay.
Your employees who serve in the National Guard and Reserve may seem different. They may work a little harder, be more confident, more willing to make the extra effort to get the job done right. So when your employees need time off to serve, remember, it's not just good for our country, it's good for your business.
Glad you could all make it.
Wow, great job, guys.
Thanks, Mr. Gordon.
Believe me, you'll be in a lot of races in your life. But don't miss this one. Join me, Jeff Gordon, in the Race to Cub Scouting. It's fun at every turn.
Fun at every turn. Racing cars and moving stars. Gotta be so fun at every turn, yeah.
Hey, you missed a spot.
Welcome back to Meet the Red Cross. I'm Dave Griffith, the Executive Director for the Heart of Missouri Chapter, and joining me for the second half of the show is one of our board members, one of our relatively new board members, Reverend Sam Powell. Reverend, thank you for being with us today.
Glad to be with you.
All right. What I like to do on these shows, Sam, is to really kind of get for our audience to know who you are, and so you might just kind of give us some of your background and how you came to the Red Cross.
Sure. I was raised in the Jefferson City area. I was raised in California, Missouri, and spent most of my life there. Went off to college in Nebraska and on to seminary in St. Louis. And then in 2010 was called as the associate pastor for Trinity Lutheran Church and School here in Jefferson City. So I've been in Jefferson City since 2010.
And your school has been, Trinity Lutheran has been in Jefferson City for how long?
143 years.
Oh, just a little while.
Just a little while. We started a church and started a school all at one time, and so we've been a part of this community since then.
I know you and I were talking before we came over here and talking about the academics that you have there at Trinity Lutheran. It's something you all are very proud of.
We're very proud of our students, our alumni that have gone on from Trinity, our staff. It's a joy to work with every day. I started my day out teaching 7th grade religion and spending time with them, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Okay. Now, you're on the board of directors.
Yes.
And so how did you come to be on the board of directors?
I came to be on the board of directors through a number of my members who, when I came to Trinity in 2010, were serving on the board themselves. And
that wouldn't be Ralph Robinette by any chance, would it?
Ralph Robinette and Jack Johnson is a former member of the board of directors, longtime member there. And the spring of 2011, they approached me and invited me to serve on the board. They knew of my previous service with the Red Cross, and that's how I ended up here today.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about your previous experience with the Red Cross.
My previous experience with the Red Cross started at a pretty early age. Red Cross swimming lessons, as many kids in the Midwest have experienced themselves. Did swimming lessons every summer, swam in our community pool during the school year in California that we're so fortunate to have. My grandma served for a long time helping out with Red Cross blood drives, and she would help watch the kids of people that came to give blood, and I got carted along with her since she watched me a lot. And when I got into high school, I went through the Red Cross lifeguarding course. Actually, Sheriff White, then a school resource officer, was my first instructor. Evie White, who works for the American Red Cross, was a later instructor I had. And then when I got into college, I took the opportunity to take an instructor course with the American Red Cross to be a lifeguard instructor. And from there, I got additional certifications to teach first aid and CPR, emergency response, eventually wilderness first aid and safety. And I've really continued teaching first aid and safety since 2003. So just finished 10 years of being a Red Cross instructor.
One of the other things that we talked about very briefly was they're in California school. I think it's something that I just found out today, but they've got their own indoor swimming pool at school.
For years, California public school system, California R1, owned and operated their own indoor pool that they've had since, I believe, the 1970s, which is very unique for a community to have an indoor lap pool, a community the size of California. Recently, the city of California came in, took it over, and has made some really nice upgrades to the indoor portion. And it's just a really wonderful blessing that really every student that goes through California schools has the opportunity to learn to swim, which is a huge impact, because generally if folks don't learn to swim at an early age, they simply don't learn to swim. And it's a huge health and safety issue when kids and adults don't know how to swim.
Well, I mean, it's one of those life skills that we can learn, and that goes with you, and it's with you all of your life.
Yeah, you might not be quite as coordinated as you were when you were 12 years old, but you've still got the ability to help yourself in a situation, if you're on vacation, if you're at the beach, that it's not something that just comes by instinct.
Any of those times that that you, in your lifeguarding career that you had, are there any experiences you lived or that you experienced that made a significant difference?
You know, I think so. For me, it was a small community pool. I actually worked in Jamestown, Missouri. It's a single lifeguard facility. It sits right in the heart of Jamestown, Missouri, and frankly, in the summers, that's really the thing to do in Jamestown. And formed a lot of relationships there. There are families that I know today at Trinity where I have a grandma that I'm good friends with. She's my neighbor here in Jefferson City. I taught her grandkids how to swim. And there's something about that that just kind of sticks with you, that you've made an impact, that you see kids today. I just talked with a mom this morning whose daughter is now in college, twin daughters now in college, that I lifeguarded for them and helped take care of them and watched them over the summers there back in the late 90s. And there's something very special and rewarding about that opportunity.
Well, I think that there's also, and this is one of the things that I've learned since coming to work for the Red Cross, and that is that taking the life-saving skills classes, like the first aid and CPR and AED and swimming lessons and babysitting classes and those kind of things, they really by having those life skills, it gives you the empowerment to be able to do something if you see it.
Well, absolutely. I can say, oddly enough, as a lifeguard, serving as a full-time lifeguard for 4 summers, being trained for many years, I haven't had to use most of my skills. And I consider myself very fortunate that I wasn't put in situations where there was a serious emergency. But I can also say that I know folks that I've trained that have had to respond. My wife has been certified for as long as we're dating and now married. And there have been a number of times where she's been out and about in the community when she was in college where, for example, a person had a seizure at a Panera Bread where she was simply shopping and it was an employee, and everybody froze except her. And she was able to step in, comfort the person, ask them to, please call 911, and just be someone that's there in that situation. And so that's been kind of a unique thing as an instructor when you hear stories from people that you've trained and worked with that have been able to respond.
One of the classes you mentioned there, I'd like for you just to speak very briefly to it, and it's one that many of our audience may not have heard about, and that is wilderness CPR.
Yeah, wilderness first aid and CPR it's really actually primarily designed, especially for folks like Boy Scouts that are truly out. In fact, for young men and their scout leaders that go to the National Scout Camp, I believe it's in Philmont, they're required, a number of the adults that go, to have that simply because, when you're working, here in Jefferson City and you're required to have first aid and CPR as a job, generally you need to respond immediately, but God willing, help will be there within moments. They're in a situation where they're having to assess and take care of folks, could be for 4 to 5, 6, 7, 8 hours before further help arrives. So it's an intensive first aid and CPR course that goes over and above simply an average regular first aid course.
Let's talk about blood services for a little bit. You mentioned that your grandma was real involved with that. I can relate to that because my own mother was a Red Cross volunteer for 35 years, and blood services was where she did a lot of hers.
Yeah.
But you've got a real close connection with your school that you have with blood services.
Yeah, one of the things that really got me involved in giving blood was our Lutheran high school here in Jefferson City, Calvary Lutheran High School. And a number of years ago, they started doing blood drives on a pretty regular basis, and that got ramped up when one of their teachers had to have some pretty major heart surgery. And in honor of him, the students really worked hard in the community to invite their family and friends to give actively and give regularly, and it's become a pretty neat tradition for that school, and they've had very successful blood drives. And so my grandpa had a 10-gallon pin from his donor days of working out in DC, and his employer always gave a half day off of work if you gave blood, and instead of resting, he would go golfing. That was his kind of motivation to himself.
God bless him.
Yeah, it was I can't blame him at all for that. And so it's neat that in my family, my grandpa had a 10-gallon pin, my grandma, still to this day. In fact, several weeks ago, I spent the day with my grandma and drove her to church, and we got stuff set up, and she sat at the desk and welcomed people as they came in for a blood drive at the Lutheran Church in California. And my mom is kind of taking over some of the coordinator roles and helping with advertising. So it's a family affair, and it's a neat thing, and it's neat to see our high school kids that are so active in it, getting into a habit of encouraging others to give, but also to give themselves.
Absolutely, and this is where when we talk about the next generation, and they are. I mean, their next generation are going to be the ones that are going to be carrying on where we are, and blood obviously is a huge asset that we have that we can, and service that we can provide to our fellow man. And learning that early on in their life is just
absolutely. It truly is a habit. For me, it took a little bit of time to develop, but I've set the habit of whenever I walk out of giving blood, whether it's at Calvary or if it's the local blood donation center, I generally pull out my phone, look at 56 days, and generally I try to give really close within that 56 days if at all possible, simply because I found that it's a relatively simple, pretty much pain-free way that I can help out, and I've got it, somebody needs it, let's give.
Well, thank you. And just in the last, we're just about out of time, but before we get out of here, Sam, I'd like for you to talk just very briefly about what serving on the board of directors for the Heart of Missouri chapter means to you, and what your role is going to be.
One of the things it really means to me is it's given me exposure to parts of the Red Cross that I didn't know a whole lot about. I knew about blood services from observing others being involved in it. I knew health and safety very well simply from my own experiences. Disaster services was something I knew very little about besides seeing things on TV. And so it's given me the opportunity to learn more about the multifaceted role of the Red Cross in our society, from blood services to military relations, disaster response, and then be able to share that with others. I'll admit, I've talked to, when we were talking about how we care for our neighbor in need, I talked to my 8th graders about it. I said, you guys can't give blood yet, but in a few years, you can. And you can encourage your parents. It's pretty hard to say no to a kid asking you to give blood. It's how I started with our high school kids. And so I can take that into my congregation, and we have conversations about how do we train our volunteers? How do we train our maybe high school kids? We have them there. Let's take the opportunity so that they can help others in need, which is a huge part of, in my case as a pastor, talking about people living out their faith and working to helping others.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for being on our show. God
Glad
bless
to.
you and everything you do for us.
Thank you.
We certainly appreciate it. Thank you for being with us on this edition of Meet the Red Cross. We'll be back again with you next month. And if you would like to help us and help the Red Cross, if you'd like to be a volunteer, or if you would like to be engaged in helping us with the typhoon relief in the Philippines and in Vietnam, stop by our office at 431 East McCarty Street or give us a phone call. And until next time, thank you for your support of the American Red Cross.